Business with a servant's heart. Welcome to the podcast. Inspiration, motivation takes. Listen to the podcast. We're all about to talk about life. Our guests will share their life story. We want you to success in life and business. We're ready and we will start shortly. We're gonna talk about life. We're going to speak on business. You're gonna shine bright. We are going to witness. Business with a servant's heart. With hosts Steve, Ramona, and Ray. Inspiration, education talks. Listen to the podcast. Steve, Ramona.
Welcome, everyone, to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast. I'm your host, Steve Ramona. I'm so excited to have you join us today. Now, we dedicate this podcast to the idea of doing business and living life with a purpose, a why. We want you to approach our work and our lives with that servant's heart. That is probably should be one of your purposes. Don't want to tell you what to do, but I know if you do that, you can truly make a difference. This show is started to motivate you, inspire you, and educate you with a servant's heart. With that impact, we want you to help you change your world. I want you to think about today. My guest is going to blow you away. I did some research. We talked before the show. You're really going to get some great tips, but more importantly, he's going to inspire the hell out of you. He's already inspired me for what he's done. But I want you to think about how you're going to serve yourself today and others. And the key word is today, because that impact you'll be able to create today, not tomorrow. Not next month, not next year. Let's start doing that today. And today's episode is proudly sponsored by our incredible partner, Pantheon Alliance. Imagine being a community of high-income, successful business owners and entrepreneurs who want to build a thought leader platform to make an impact and change in the world. To be part of this community, reach out to me and I'll get you all the information. And from there, cancer's everywhere. I've had skin cancer. I've dealt with cancer. I know firsthand, but there's tragic events that happen with that. And how do we get past that? My guest is going to talk to you about that, what he's done. He's got some great tips, like I said earlier, and advice. And please take a pad and paper, and I want you to take some notes because I think you really want to do that. With that being said, Dave, welcome to the show.
Steve, thanks for having me on the podcast. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here, and I've been looking forward to our conversation for quite some time.
Well, you're a true servant's heart because you've dealt with the loss of a child, which can't be more catastrophic or tragic. How have you dealt with that? It's been a while, right?
Yeah, it's been over 21 years since my daughter, Jeannine, transitioned, and I call it transition from the physical world to the spiritual world. Other individuals conceptualize death differently, and they may say passed away or died or through death, and it all works. It's just how we conceptualize it. But it's been over 21 years. She was 18 years old. She was diagnosed with a very rare form of cancer called alveolar rhabdomyosarcoma, which was sarcomas in and of itself are rare. They constitute, at least in 2002, they constituted 3 to 4% of newly diagnosed cancer patients per year. What complicated her diagnosis was the fact that she had been pregnant, and she was diagnosed shortly after giving birth to her first child, and her only child, and my first granddaughter, Brianna, who's now 22 years old. At the time that we had gotten the diagnosis, a week prior to her diagnosis, I had completed the requirements for my master's degree. May 2nd, 2002, I was celebrating the birth of my first grandchild. And then May 26th, I found myself in a battle for cancer with a terminally ill child. So you want to talk about the highs and lows of life and life turning on a dime. Within that a little over 3-week period, my life changed radically. And she went through about 6 rounds of aggressive chemotherapy, but she had a type of cancer, Steve, that was not curable. The experts at Dana-Farber Research Center in hospital in Boston couldn't find a cure for her cancer. There wasn't a cure for it. She did 6 rounds of very aggressive chemotherapy. It never went to full remission. Cancer remetastasized. And then on March 1st, 2003, she transitioned to a new existence at 18. at home with hospice care. And I can tell you all the training in the world I had previously as a social worker, as an addictions counselor, the work that I did with individuals who had, who had traumas due to addiction or not related to addiction, didn't even begin to prepare me for the path I was about to walk. At 47 years old, we talk about midlife crisis at 47. My midlife crisis was, and to quote the late great Neil Peart, was to determine what kind of a person I wanted to be and the kind of world that I wanted to live in. Everything that I had believed in was up for discussion. It was up for
Yeah.
scrutiny. And I had to look at my past, I had to look at my present, and to determine what kind of a future I wanted to have.
Transition is such a beautiful word. I really appreciate you bringing it up. That's a great word, audience, for it's just so pleasant, and because it's not a pleasant experience. But she sounds like a fighter, but also too, she left you a beautiful gift, this granddaughter. So you can look at good amongst the bad, right?
Yeah, and I think, in life, I mean, grief, I think, is a microcosm of life in general. I don't think we go through every day of our lives being happy every day. I think the life is full of equal parts of happiness, joy, sadness, anger. But it makes us who we are. And that combination we can learn from all of it, and that contributes to genuineness. And that's one of the things that I've learned through my grief journey and that I've tried to impart to other individuals I've done bereavement support with and the students that I teach is that everything has something to teach us. There's beauty in everything if we look hard enough. The saddest people I know are the most compassionate hearts that I know, and they have a servant's heart. And it's because of their own sadness and they're sitting with sadness that it's morphed into compassion. So everything has something to teach us. None of our emotions need to be ignored or disowned because they make us who we are.
I agree with you. Everybody has a servant's heart. Whether they bring it out,
Hmm.
that's the whole thing we're working on. I'm working on with this podcast. You said something, a great lesson, speaking of teaching, that you had all this training, did nothing for you. How important is somebody like you or you helping people with the bereavement? Because there's no book that you can read, go, oh, I just lost my dad.
No.
Here's step 1, 2, 3, right?
Yeah, there isn't. I mean, one of the prevailing theories many, many years ago in the field of thanatology or the study of death and dying was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of grief, and she developed that to give a framework and a vocabulary for individuals who are at their end of life chapter, for terminally ill individuals. But many in Western society extrapolated that and said, this is how we grieve. So the perception was that we had to grieve in a straight line fashion, linear fashion. We go from denial to anger to bargaining. We do it in a predetermined period of time, within 6 months to a year. And then after that, we stop grieving and
Mm-hmm.
and our life goes on as before. The reality is that for many, the second year is more challenging than the first year of grief because the second year, the reality of the loss sets in. The first year, it's kind of more surreal. I know, Steve, from my experience with my daughter, I kept thinking, she was going to show up, just open the door and say, "Hey, Dad, just kidding," or that God or the higher power that was deemed in charge of the universe was going to come down and say, "Dave," and Sherry is my wife and my two sons, Dan and Matt. We're going to give you your life back as it was. We took your sister, we took your daughter in error. Here she is. But once I hit 1 year and 1 day into my grief, I realized that this is my life going forward. I am going to have to now determine the type of life I want to live and how I want to live it moving forward without the physical presence of my daughter. Um, Grief is very much a circular process. The raw pain of grief can surface at any time, no matter how long it's been since the loss. And it's not pathological, it's not abnormal. Uh, we relationships don't die because the physical body does. Relationships are ongoing. And there are times through the rest of our life we're going to grieve the loss of that relationship because of significant things that are happening at that time. And it's perfectly fine to do that.
That's a servant's heart right there. Looking at the positive, everything you get. Grief, it's going to happen. You just lost your daughter. I lost my dad, my best friend. It's just going to happen.
Hmm.
But I love what you said about all that. It's such an audience. Take that note. If you've got somebody on their deathbed or somebody not doing well, there don't have to be death. It could be the death of a relationship, right? doesn't have to be the actual death of the body. Talk about that because I think that's part of this.
Yeah, there's Elizabeth Welsh Burke coined a term called symbolic loss, and to paraphrase the definition, it's losses that symbolize the loss of relationships, the loss of future dreams, the loss of an idea. So it could be a divorce, it could be the loss of a job, it could be selling a home, it could be putting your parents into a nursing home, it could be empty nest syndrome. And the other thing is those symbolic losses are also very much inherent and very much a part of loss due to death, because anytime that there's a milestone in our lives, let's say like a significant relationship where somebody in the family gets married, the first thought is I wish goes to the person people that you wish they were there. And that's another reason why grief is circular, because of the secondary losses that go along with it, or the symbolic losses that go along with it. But symbolic loss by itself is something to be honored, it's something to be respected, and it's something that is grieved just as deeply as a loss due to death.
Yeah, I experienced my wife's son just moved out. I'm in Northern California, just moved to LA. She's going to deal with a loss, and I've got to support her with that. Not, again, it's not a death, but it's still, she's lived with him his whole life till he's 21. So I love you say that because the audience needs to hear that. Other thing I love about you is you're educating people with speaking gigs and workshops. Talk about those because I love what you're doing with that.
Well, recently I was in Hartford, Connecticut for the National Professional Development Grief Awareness Conference. That was over Labor Day weekend. And I did a workshop basically on integration of grief and creating continued bonds to help us work through grief. We talked about just ways that we could, maintain the relationships and integrate our grief so that we could move forward with the best parts of our loved ones, a part of our own lives, and in a way to redefine the narrative. I've also done, basic grief 101 trainings. In fact, I'm doing something for Utica University for the Institute for the Study of Integrative Healthcare on Grief 101 coming up in October. I've been a past keynote speaker on various aspects of grief. I've done workshops at Compassionate Friends and Bereaved Parents of the USA national conferences and gathering on various aspects of grief. And I teach at Utica University. I've been teaching there for over 21 years. And one of the courses I teach is Death, Dying, and Bereavement. And where we talk about all things related to thanatology, the typical discussions, but also the spiritual aspects of death as well too. And my goal is to try to help individuals become more comfortable talking about an uncomfortable topic and giving them the basic understanding and the background and the academic training so that they can work with somebody effectively who's experienced loss.
Death is not a conversation people want to have, but they want to have conversations about everything else. That's going to happen.
Yep.
It's 100% right.
Yeah, I mean, there's two things in this society that we don't talk about. One is death, and the other is sex. And as
Yeah.
far as I know, people are still dying. As far as I know, people are still having sex. So, but we're fascinated with the topic, but we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And as I read an excerpt from a comedian's book, and I forgot the name of it, talking about death isn't going to make you dead. Um, what we fear will consume us unless we talk about it. Once we get it out in the open, the fear becomes more manageable and may even dissipate. So my mission is to help individuals become more comfortable talking about a difficult topic and doing it in a way that creates a very stress-free, a very safe atmosphere for those discussions to happen.
You're saving lives because I know grief can lead to death by suicide. It's happened. I've seen it in my own life. I don't know if you have. I know people listening probably have. Um, when you educate people, do you have a good story or a couple of people that you've worked with and help them with their grief and help them to move on? Because I think that's the biggest problem.
Boy, I'm trying to go through
Yeah,
I
I'm
know
sure.
there's been several that come to mind, but there's one story that I do want to tell, and it's related to one of my students who is experiencing grief, of deep grief, and I'm just going to leave her name out of it
Yep.
to protect her anonymity. But she took death, dying, and bereavement with me 3 times. And she failed at the first 2 times, but there's legitimate reasons that she did. Her brother had died by a firearm suicide. in her own home, and her father had found her. That caused a lot of rifts within the family, a lot of alienation between, family members, and particularly her, to the point where she felt isolated. And I remember telling her the third time, I said, look, you could take an easier 3 credit elective to graduate than this. I know what you've been through. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't want to take this class. I take something. She goes, no, I want to take it. I want to start what I finished. I said, okay. During the semester, she had talked about feeling so isolated in her grief, so overwhelmed and so traumatized that she had contemplated taking her life. And she was talking to me, and I appreciated the trust that she had, Steve, because I always believe that when somebody talks to you about wanting to complete suicide, what they're saying is talk me out of it. Give me a reason to go on. Give me a reason to delay my
Yeah.
decision. So she looked at me and she said, I don't think anybody would care. And I usually get choked up when I talk about this. If I died, if I took my life tomorrow, nobody would care. So I looked at her, and being, somebody who had lost a child, and who I consider my students to be an extended part of my family, because in the beginning, when I was in deep grief, their energy gave me a reason to go on, as well as that whole Utica University community. But I told her, I said, keep in mind, there's going to be one person who's going to be upset that you're no longer a part of this world. And she said, who's that? I said, that's going to be me. I said, so because you became a part of my family when you took my class, I said, guarantee there's going to be one person, and that's going to be me. So if you take your life, understand that I'm going to be extremely sad that you're no longer a part of this world. She got through the course. She got a B plus. She's, I believe, engaged or now married. Is ready to have her first child. So that to me is the one that sticks out. And there are many that I mean, I've really sat and been inspired by so many people's stories of who've experienced the deepest tragedies, and I'm inspired by those stories, and their stories become a part of who I am. They drive what I do. But that one with my particular student always stands out because um, I've kind of figured it just wasn't me that was involved in talking with her. It was my daughter as well too,
Yeah,
because
amen.
the best parts of my daughter are best parts of me. And I tell everybody, you're going to get a package deal. When you get me, you get her.
So beautiful. You gave me goosebumps, and I'm tearing up a little bit because not only did you save a life, but it was a simple phrase. I will be missing you. One simple phrase that changed the trajectory of somebody's life. Because why I'm saying that, that's what a servant heart does. You go deep in your heart, in your soul doing this. And I've just met you, but I can feel it and I can see it. What's interesting to me is your podcast has it's called the Teaching Journeys podcast. You
Hmm.
have more of these stories
Hmm.
about some of this stuff. Talk about that.
Well, the Teaching Journeys podcast, we dropped the first episode March 31st, 2023. And the inspiration for the podcast, I have to give a shout out to 2 real pain in the butt students that I had at Utica University, who said, and I go on a first name basis. I tell my students, call me Dave. I wasn't born professor. I wasn't born Mister. I'm a Dave. In particular, when we're talking about a very intimate topic like death, we could throw formality out the window. Um, so they said, you ought to really do a podcast, bring what you teach into the classroom out to the public. And I resisted the idea for about a year. It just wasn't the time. And then all of us, they kept pushing it. And I said, you're not going to let this go, are you? And they just shook their heads and said, nope, we're not letting it go. Then finally, everybody I met outside of Utica University, my students said, you ought to do a podcast. You ought to do a podcast. So I looked up at the sky and said, okay, universe, I get it. So my son, who has his own podcast, he has a Buffalo Bills podcast. He set me up with a streaming service, set me up with a pop filter mic, told me this is the one to use, which I'm using now, by the way. And being a podcast host, I'm very sensitive when I'm on other podcasts to make sure that I have the best quality so that it reduces some of the editing woes that sometimes we go through. So
Yeah.
and uh, I've had individuals who have had some very interesting, have transcended challenge due to loss, due to other life transitions. I've had business coaches on who have shared their skills. I had somebody recently on who I just dropped the podcast recently that an individual is trying to redefine healthcare who's a doctor himself. So it's morphed from simply grief, which is a big part of it, to other individuals who have life skills or journeys or tips that they're willing to share that are going to help individuals in their own life path, whatever that may be. So anybody that's got a skill that they're willing to impart. And the mantra of the podcast is that we're all students and teachers, so let's learn from each other. There isn't,
Yeah.
I tell my students, you're not too young for me to learn from you, and hopefully I'm not too old for you to learn from me. We're all in this together. We all share, we're all put together by a single thread. We can all learn from each other and we can be in service to each other, no matter how young and old we are.
That's a tip to the audience. If you just do that in life and business, you'll be better. How much we don't know that. Thank you for sharing that, because I agree. I'm 63. I've got a 30-year-old business partner. He teaches me every day. He laughs. He goes, "You're the
Mm.
old man." I said, "Yeah, but the old man likes to learn." So I love that you said that. Now we're gonna use the word transition from the podcast to you on Open to Hope Television. One, I love the name of that television. It's a show, I believe, right?
Mhm. They
Tell
have
me
both
about that
have,
experience.
well, Open to Hope is the brainchild of Heidi and Gloria Horsley. Gloria and Heidi have been involved with the Compassionate Friends of the USA for years, and they do a lot of service work for them in honor of their transitioned uh, brother and son. Um, and and Open to Hope it's a variety of different things. They will promote authors' books. They have a podcast. They have a lot of individuals who have done some impactful work in the world of grief. They have articles by contributing writers. I'm still listed as a contributing writer for them, but I haven't written for them honestly in years. But I've written a lot of articles for them on death of a child and spiritual
Yeah.
aspects of dying, and there's articles on death of a friend. There's articles on it's got something for everybody. And the thing I like about it is that the articles are manageable as far as reading. I mean, there may be 500 to 1,000 words, and for individuals who are in the early throes of grief, the ability to concentrate for any period of time is limited. So I usually recommend that they look at short articles, maybe 1,000 words, that have some specific tips or bulleted points, things that they are capable of paying attention to until they move forward in grief and their concentration abilities begin to expand, where they can take a look at more intense material and more dense
Yeah.
material.
Very cool. I love that. I just love the name Open to Hope. You're a
Yeah,
hope dealer. I learned that phrase last week. You're a hope dealer, which is powerful.
yeah. That
Powerful.
the experience on their podcast was really interesting. On their TV show was really interesting. They record in a studio in New York. It's a very welcoming atmosphere. It's just like basically having a conversation with two friends.
Yeah.
And they're very passionate about what they do to help bereaved individuals, help individuals who've experienced loss move through that, and find redefine meaning in a new life again after loss. So I have a lot of respect for the work that they both do.
Yeah. You say bereavement a number of times here, and it brings back baseball's big with this MLB. I'm a big sports guy, but I'll see Mike Trout was on bereavement list. I love that they promote that, to give the
Mhm.
guy, and there's paying him lots of money, but that's got to be the important thing, is family and grief, and they take care of it by giving them time off. It's so powerful.
Well, and a lot of times, Steve, I think we forget that grief hits everybody, and grief can hit the most famous of athletes, the richest individuals. It doesn't discriminate. If we live long enough, we're all going to experience loss. Um, I'm 69 years old, and my daughter's loss is certainly not the only loss I've experienced before or after. Um, and it's just it's a part of life. And there are days that I wish there was another tragedy or another event that kind of that caused me to do a perspective shift. But as I tell individuals, we don't have control over the challenges that we confront in our life. The only control we have is how we respond to them. And and we didn't come into this life expecting to lead an easy one. There's no such thing as that. I mean,
Yeah.
challenge is going to befall all of us, um, in, but in varying degrees. And and the quality of our life is determined by how well we respond to it and how well we transcend it.
And money does not answer grief
No,
and mental health. It has
no.
nothing to do with it. It's such an outside. People don't understand that. Money doesn't make you happy, even though people still say that to this day, which I understand. Dave, what's the future look like for you and your education and helping people with bereavement and grief?
Well, I think I tell I tell my the chairperson at the Psych Child Life Department. I said, keep hitting me up with courses because I have no intention of retiring anytime soon. I'm very passionate about teaching. Um, so I would see that as continuing to be a part of my, my journey. Obviously, seeing where the podcast is going to continue to go and trying to have very impactful guests that can impart some tools that can help the individuals who are going through challenge meet those challenges. So I would see the podcast, continuing to evolve, and also, expanding it to different categories where different categories outside of grief as well too, but yet, with individuals who have different challenges or have just life skills to teach. And whatever else the universe has in mind for me, Steve, I'm open to it. Anytime I've tried to impose my will on what I want to have happen, the universe says, hold my beer. You know, here's the plan. So I've learned at this point, not to do that. So
Well, we're blessed that you're still educating. I'm glad to hear that you're not any close to retiring because you're doing so many good things.
no. And plus, my students keep me young. I have a blast being around them. And I want to continue to do that for as long as I'm physically and cognitively able to.
Yeah. We got a last question here. We're coming to the end. It flew by fast. Actually, we're overtime, which is well worth. Grief and bereavement deserves overtime, and you definitely deserve it. Somebody listening is dealing with grief. What's one step they can take or one piece of advice you can give them to start?
Well, first thing is to be gentle with yourself because with grief, it affects us physically, it affects us cognitively, it changes the landscape of our world. It causes us to question what we're going to be doing moving forward, what individuals are going to be a part of that. We have to allow ourselves to wallow in the muck of grief before we can wallow through it. We have to let those emotions envelop us. We have to learn that we can sit with those emotions, we can get through those emotions, and eventually keep moving. Something is going to come up that's going to give you inspiration and hope, and also avail yourself of a really, really good support group that has individuals that understand the specific loss that you're going through. And read what you can about grief to increase your vocabulary and knowledge of it. That in the beginning, Steve, reading books from other parents who had experienced the death of a child to see what they did to get through that, especially for me in early grief, was key, and finding a good support group. And we did find one locally that was specific for parents who had experienced the death of a child. And just remember, if you take two steps forward and one step backward, or one step ahead, you still made progress. Progress is not a linear progression in grief. There's going to be starts and stops. And the last thing, I know you said one, but there's like different categories to
All
this.
right.
Find one thing you can be grateful for every day and write that down. Gratitude is a big piece of that. Even in the worst day of your life, you can find something to be grateful for, even if it's that person who smiled at you and opened the door for you. And that itself might have helped you get through a specific moment. So that's kind of one teaching with about four different subcategories.
Perfect. No, you gave me more than I expected, which is always great. Again, that's what a servant heart does. We bring more value than what we're asked. Very serious subject, very important subject, death and grief. I'm glad we talked about it. Let's have a little bit of fun for the end. Are you ready?
Sure.
So you have a reservation at a restaurant for a table of four. You're obviously going to sit in one of the chairs. Who are you going to invite, dead or alive? Why are you inviting them? And what food would you order?
Oh, goodness. First and foremost would be Neil Peart, the late great drummer of Rush. His writings and his journey inspired me in early grief. He had his own tragedies where his wife and daughter transitioned 10 months apart in 1997 and 1998. He left the band Rush. He told them, consider me retired. He took a 55,000-mile road trip across the United States, Canada, and Mexico to essentially determine the type of person he wanted to be and the kind of world he wanted to live in. And that's, I quote that all the time because that's for anybody facing life-altering tragedy, that's a decision. That's a decision we have to look at. And that's the thing that we're tasked with. Sean Penn would be another one. He's alive. I would have Neil Peart and Sean Penn. Sean Penn is no stranger to loss. I think his brother Chris had transitioned several years ago. And I think in the Malibu scene, I think he had 10 friends who had died from a variety of but plus his acting is just so on point, so versatile. And he defies conventional wisdom, which is why I like him. And he's my favorite male actor. So what, I got one more?
One more.
One more. Morgan Freeman would be the next person that I would have. He's not only was he great in Shawshank Redemption, but he also did a series called The Story of God where he investigated different religions, afterlife beliefs. He's just very, and if I get one more, Denzel Washington, just because
Yeah.
of those two I think are very influential individuals. They have been, and we can also throw Martin Luther King in there too. I mean, those three would be who I'd want. Those five would be who I'd want. I know you said four, but those, if I could have four out of those five, I'd be happy. But Neil Peart and Sean Penn would be the first two, and then we could
Yeah,
choose from the other three.
yeah, or just bring them all. It's your table. You could do what
Yeah,
you want.
I'll
And
just bring
tell
them all in.
you bring them in and tell the restaurant you're going to stay open late because there's
Yeah,
a lot of conversation happening.
yeah.
So
I'll,
what would you order for food for them?
whatever they wanted, you
What would
know.
you like?
What would I like? Boy, I'll tell you, prime rib.
Okay. I should never do these shows at lunch. Now you're getting me hungry. That sounds so
I do either prime rib or a good salmon.
good. There we go. Dave, I thank you so much for being on. You've really blessed us today. You've definitely blessed me. You've made me think about a lot of things in my life, which is so good. Keep doing what you're doing. People listening, I'm sure, want to reach out, connect with you, and support you. How can they do that?
Well, they can do a couple of different things. I'm all over social media. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. But if they want to email me, they can email me at bootsyandangel@gmail.com. They can go to my website, which is davidrobertsmsw.com. Or if they want to explore my author page, psychologyprofessor and minister.com. So they can find me in a variety of different ways, and I'm very easy to reach. I'm not going anywhere anytime soon.
I love it. Audience, subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm just saying because you have access to Dave multiple times. I have people tell me, what's your YouTube, and asking me for the link. Well, when you subscribe, you have access to it. It's in your, if you so desire, and share your family and friends. Dave said, we're all going to deal with grief at some time. Why not listen to this podcast or reach out to Dave with any questions or comments or be part of his workshop or keynote speeches that he does? We're all here to help each other. We all have a servant's heart. He definitely has a huge one. It's probably bigger than this room I'm in, but we all can get there and be there. The other thing too is comment on the YouTube channel. It'll be on podcast down the road too, but comment if there's any comments for Dave. I'll make sure he gets them. You have critique for this podcast. It's about you. It's for you, the audience. So if there's something I could do better, I will do it because I've done it. I've had people reach out and critique, hey, do this and tweak this, and I've done that. So let us know. And as always, me and Dave want to thank you so much for watching and listening to this podcast. And we'll see you all in the next episode of Doing Business with a Servant's Heart. Have a great day, everyone.